What's going on, guys? French Fit coming back at you with another video, and today I just wanted to spill some quick thoughts on what are my opinions on deloading. Good, bad, otherwise, better for other people than they are for certain populations. Just kind of spill my thoughts. If you agree, disagree, have some different thoughts, throw it down in the comments below. Hopefully we can learn a little bit from each other and just improve our thought processes overall. So, deloads. What is the premise of a deload? Basically, you accumulate fatigue over several weeks of training. Could be 3 weeks, could be 5 weeks, could be 8 weeks. You train hard, you accumulate fatigue, and so you don't overtrain. You take a deload where you're going to reduce, volume, intensity, etc. Take days off, maybe lower the frequency a little bit. You might do the same exercises. You're not just doing nothing, but you're going to lower the overall work that you're doing in hopes of recovering, and then you can go back and hit it hard for another few weeks. So I think when people get into the fitness space, they hear of deloads like something you should do every 4 to 6 weeks. If you're lower training age, you might be able to go longer without deloading, but if you're super strong, you might only be able to go like 3 weeks until you need a deload. So what are my thoughts on it? I think that a lot of people either aren't strong enough or don't train consistently enough to even require a deload. So basically, it's a nice way of me saying if you don't train hard enough, you don't deserve a deload. Because if you don't accrue enough fatigue over time, there's really no reason to lower your training load, intensity, volume, etc. because you're just going to be taking a step back. The point of a deload is you get up to this edge of where you're about to overtrain, then you deload, you bring that cumulative fatigue down so you can train harder again. But if you never reach this point of getting that enough cumulative fatigue, if you never train hard enough, or you're not training enough weeks in a row to get to that point, it's kind of ruins the point of a deload. Now, we could talk about it from a psychological perspective too. I think another big thing of the deload is kind of that psychological reset, break up the monotony. A lot of times when you deload, you might start a new program the next week, new exercises, maybe slightly different goal, rep schemes, progressions. That's definitely another thing to think about. If you need just a psychological reset, that could be a reason to take a deload. But I think for people that are beginners and low training age in general, you're just not, most people when they start off, they're pretty weak. Everyone was weak before they were strong. You're not strong enough to really accumulate enough fatigue in order to require a deload. You think about when people start lifting weights, 14, 15, 16 years old, they're probably not lifting a house. Do they really need a deload? It's probably better for them to just train consistently. And I found a lot of times, especially when you talk about the college setting or even the high school setting, or just in general for people, general population, the deloads are kind of built in. Your life schedule kind of decides when you're going to deload. In college, I know stuff like fall break, finals week, where the kids aren't required, you can't make them train during finals week, spring break when they're away from campus. Those are kind of your built-in deloads. So when I trained college athletes, I kind of approached it that way. Okay, most of these people have a slower training age. They're not super strong. We don't need to exactly deload because those deloads are kind of built into the academic calendar. And it could be the same for your personal life. If you have a vacation planned for, 10 days, and you're not really going to prioritize hitting the gym, which you shouldn't maybe because you're on vacation, that's kind of your built-in deload. No need to deload, 2 weeks prior to your vacation unless you really super need it, because you're going to get that nice big break with reduced training volume, frequency, all that good stuff during your vacation. Now, I do think they can be important, especially though if you're a more trained athlete. If you're super strong, the stronger you are, the harder it is to make progress. This goes for kind of any goal. The better you are at something, the harder it is to keep improving. So if you're a elite world-class power lifter, you may be able to go 3, maybe 4 weeks before you have to deload. That's another situation. But I think a lot of times, whether it's in the college or even the professional setting, we're dealing with people that are really good at their sport, but from a training age perspective in the weight room, they're not very advanced. They got there because they're advanced at the skill, not as much as the weight room as we might like to think they are. We kind of associate being advanced with skill with being advanced in the weight room. And that's oftentimes, from my experience, that's not the case. And I think that's why a lot of reasons you don't really need to deload guys as often as you might think. Now, When it gets to in season, you could make a different argument, and that's kind of a whole different ball game. Obviously, your volumes and intensities are going to be different than they are in the preseason and in the off-season period. And I think the travel plays into that as well, especially college and professional sport. If you're on like a big road trip, if you know you're going to have some tough opponents in a certain week during the year, maybe that's when you deload. And then your other weeks when you have games that are closer to home, you're not on the road as much, you can push the intensity a little bit more. So just some kind of quick blurbs on deloading. Another thing is, I don't think you have to deload all movements. I think a lot of times when people think of deload, they think of, okay, I'm just going to slash volume sets, slash sets and intensity in half, do 50% of what I was going to do. And that's not honestly the worst thing, but I think there's certain movements that don't fatigue you enough, that don't stress the central nervous system enough to require a deload. Like when I think of movements that are really creating the most fatigue, heavy compounds, things like intensive plyometrics, so like sprinting, jumping, stuff like that, heavy squatting patterns, heavy pulling patterns, pulling from the ground, deadlifts, stuff like that, heavy, bench presses, stuff that's going to kind of beat up the joints a little bit more, stuff where you're going to be able to lift a higher absolute load. That's the stuff that I think should be deloaded. When it comes to accessory movements, do I really think you need to deload on a dumbbell row, single arm dumbbell row? Not really, because you can only single arm dumbbell row, as much as the highest dumbbell goes in your gym. And yeah, it's a good exercise for your back, but it's probably not going to fatigue your central nervous system nearly as much as like a heavy press, a heavy squat, a heavy hinging movement. So when it comes to accessories, especially in the upper body, I really don't think a lot of those need to be deloaded as much. I think you can get away with just reducing the overall volume on the compounds. And then that doesn't mean you increase the volume to make up for that. Maybe you keep that volume the same for the accessories. Maybe you just cut it a little bit. But with accessory work, I don't think like auxiliary work like biceps, triceps, shoulders, if you want to get into like lateral delts and stuff like that, if we want to talk about muscle groups, torso, abdominals, could be a little bit different for lower body movements. It depends, are you going to deload like a rear foot elevated split squat? If it's your main movement, yeah, probably. But if it's an auxiliary movement that's a little bit later in your training session and it's maybe only with one dumbbell in a goblet position, you can probably get away with just maintaining that volume and intensity. But obviously that's going to vary for different people. If you're a super advanced athlete, you might need just a full deload, slashing everything in half. But yeah, that's just some quick thoughts that I have on deloads personally at this point in my life. I personally don't take a lot of deloads because I find that, like I was talking about earlier, my life kind of plans in those deloads, vacation or like, oh, I'm traveling this week back to work. My schedule's going to be a little messed up. I'm probably not going to want to train as hard anyway. So I'm just going to kind of take that as my deload 3-4 day period where I may not train at all or just, train once and it's just going to be something quick. But yeah, that's kind of my opinions on deloads. Not good, not bad. I just think there has to be context, like literally anything in life. Look at them through that lens. And I think don't just deload for the sake of deloading. Don't just say, oh, someone told me you got to deload every 4 to 5 weeks. I don't really feel, I feel good, but I need to deload because it's someone told me I had to do it. So have a reason to deload. Think about it strategically. Context is key. Being able to adapt your programming, be an agile coach. As always, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you did. Like I said, comment down below your thoughts on the topic. Make sure to follow me over at Instagram at French_fit40 for fitness related content, and then tap into my podcast I do with my boy Brian, Bev Boys. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. See you next time. Peace.